Hey goal achievers, it's Coach Justin here. I had the extremely rare opportunity of working side by side with one of the greatest teachers in the world on human potential and success when he was alive, Bob Proctor. In this time, I was fortunate enough to coach over 2,000 clients from dozens and dozens of industries all over the world. And today, I want to share with you the 3 most impactful lessons I learned from working side by side with Bob. These are lessons that helped me completely change my life. Going from a carpenter who was working 65 to 70 hours a week, I was run down, stressed, fed up, and just about ready to give up, to someone who's living time, financial, and emotional freedom. However, they only work when we actually implement them. And I want you to make sure that you stick around to number 3 because in my opinion, it's my favorite and it's the most impactful. Let's get into lesson number 1, discipline, consistency, and persistence. Now, if I didn't hear Bob say these words 15,000 times in the 6.5 years where him and I were partnered together, it must have been 20,000 times. And the truth is that most people who study personal development, they're relying on motivation and inspiration. However, motivation is temporary and inspiration never lasts. The true building blocks of time freedom, financial freedom, and emotional freedom are discipline, consistency, and persistence. Discipline is the ability to give yourself a command and follow it. The opposite to discipline is procrastination. And I truly do believe, after coaching over 2,000 clients and also implementing these principles into my life, discipline is the root cause of confidence, self-respect, and an elevates self-worth and self-esteem. Consistency. Now, consistency is the ability to do ordinary things for an extraordinary period of time. Most people who study personal development, and even people who don't study personal development, is what they're trying to do, whether they're conscious of it or unconscious of it, is they're trying to do all of 2025's growth in one day, or they're trying to do all of this month's growth in one day. This leads to becoming inconsistent, but it also leads to burnout and temporary effort. And I fell into this trap. When I first started studying personal development, my personal development routine would consist of 6 or 7 or 8 things, where I was trying to do 10 or 12 income producing activities in one day, and I was good one day, poor the next, good for 3 days, poor for 3 days, and it was constantly going one step forward, one step back. Then I heard the quote, consistency is the ability to do ordinary things for an extraordinary period of time. As what I was able to do is I was able to cut back what I was doing on a daily basis, but I was able to maintain this for long periods of time. And this had a couple of really positive effects. So the first effect that it has was, for the first time, my results started to compound. It wasn't one really good day, one poor day. It was good days stacked over a long period of time. Compound interest. What did Warren Buffett say? It's the 8th wonder of the world. Another thing that it allowed me to do is it allowed me to avoid burnout. For the longest time, I was trying to achieve my goals literally by white knuckling it, right? I was putting all my eggs in the basket of hard work alone and effort, and I would see temporary results for a short period of time, but the effort that I implemented was not sustainable, so when the effort stopped, the result stopped. And finally, persistence. Napoleon Hill said, persistence is to man what carbon is to steel. And persistence is the ability to show up like the person you want to become with not one scrap of physical evidence in your outside conditions and circumstances that you're going in the right direction. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen in my 12 or 13 years of being a part of the personal development industry who quit 3 feet from gold. They're doing everything right. They're doing the work, they're studying, they're taking income producing activities, and right before they're about to see the physical manifestation of their effort, they quit. Lesson number 2 is how to never die with regret. One of the first ever conversations I actually had with Bob, one of our coaching calls, he had me perform an exercise. And he said, Justin, he said, I want you to sit back. He said, and I want you to imagine that you're 85 years old, 90 years old. He said, you're in a rocking chair, and he said, you've lived your whole life. He said, so a lot of your life is behind you and you have very little life in front of you. He said, you may be a little bit sick and a little bit tired. He said, your physical body is starting to give way. He said, but you're very, very sharp in your mind. He said, do you want to be sitting in that rocking chair with regret? Looking back and saying to yourself, I should have invested in that coach. I should have invested in that business. I should have taken that risk. See, is what I see is a lot of people let fear of failure, fear of criticism, and fear of loss control their life. Now, I want to be very clear on this. This doesn't mean that you go in and you adopt this mentality where you're living every life like your last, and you're going out and you're making decisions where you're playing roulette and sometimes it's winning and sometimes it's losing. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm a really big believer in making cool, calm, calculated decisions. And there is definitely a way to create a decision-making process where you're taking risks, you're moving forward, you're progressing towards your goal, but you're not betting the farm every time you do that. So I'll give you a little bit of an insight to what I do personally in my decision-making process. Whenever I'm presented with an opportunity, the first thing I do is I do as much research and I educate myself on that opportunity as much as possible. I don't just put myself into an echo chamber and look at all the positive. I look at the positive, I look at the negative, I compare the positive argument to the negative argument, and I come up with somewhat of a decision for myself. Then is what I do, and I feel like this is the most important thing, I ask myself, if I move forward with this, what is the absolute best thing that can happen? And I really allow myself to dream. Maybe I'm able to earn millions of dollars, time freedom, quit my job, spend the day with my daughter, whatever your goal may be. Then I ask myself, can I live with the opposite of that decision, right? So I'll give you a little bit of an example. I was on a call, it was February 28th of 2015, and it was on a call with one of Bob's top coaches. And at the time, the investment to be mentored by Bob was $7,500 USD. And I was living in Melbourne, Australia at the time. So, $7,500 USD was, for example, like $12,000 or $13,000. And for where I was in that time and place, that was a lot of money to me. And I'd spent 3.5 years, consuming YouTube, reading books, attending free seminars and webinars, or spending a couple $100 here and a couple $100 there. And I kind of got to the point where I realized what I was doing was not working. But I still remember where I was standing that day when I made the investment, and I remember how scared I was. My voice was all croaky, I was sweating, I had the sweaty palms. And in that moment, firstly, I knew that Bob could help me just because of his reputation and how many people he'd helped in the past. But I had to ask myself, what is the risk to reward, right? And I broke it up in payments. I didn't pay for the whole thing at once. And I had to ask myself, what was the absolute best that can come from this opportunity? And what is the worst? And when it comes to the worst, can I live with the worst? So I personally am not encouraging someone to go out there and to, start their business today and quit their job tomorrow. That's financially irresponsible. But as what people don't realize is they can actually make these risky decisions very calculated and mitigating a lot of the risk and a lot of the failure. So I'll give you another example, right? One of the things that I work with my clients on is what I just mentioned before, not having that mentality or the mind frame of burn all your bridges, quit your job today, start a business tomorrow. That's financially irresponsible. You cut off your source of income, your basic needs aren't met, you go into lack, limitation, worry, doubt, and fear, and no one wins. How many people do you see? You say, 85% of businesses fail in the first year. Whereas what I actually help my clients do is I help them start their first business as a side hustle, which is what I did all the way back in 2015. I helped them establish a freedom number, and how that's done is sitting down and working out all your essential bills, rent, mortgage, car payments, school fees, utilities, food, okay? So just to use this example, the person might be earning $100,000 a year and have $50,000 a year in essential expenses. That $50,000 a year then becomes their freedom number. And this is what I did 10 years ago. The first goal in their business is to achieve that freedom number. So once they do hit that freedom number, their essential expenses are covered and they can smoothly transition out of their full-time job into working for themselves full-time. So they'll have financial freedom, and then for the first time in their life, they'll also have time freedom. Lesson number 3, implementation. A quote that I coined was, the ideas only work when we work the ideas. And as what a lot of people do with personal development, with these principles, is they're reading and memorizing. However, they're failing to actually understand and apply. And I want to give you a silly example, but a really impactful example of what most people are doing. I want you to imagine that someone wants to lose weight, right? They want to lose 50 pounds, for example. And they wake up in the morning, before work, they go to the gym and they do an hour of cardio. Then on the way to work, they get McDonald's for breakfast. Then for lunch, they get pizza. Then after work, they say, I remember I want to keep losing weight. They go and they do another hour of cardio at the gym. And then on the way home from the gym at night, they get KFC or Burger King, whatever their choice of fast food is. Now, this person will weigh themselves at the end of the week and they will not lose any weight. Maybe they've even gained weight, they've eaten so unhealthy. And they think to themselves, how is that possible? I've been busting my ass. I was in the gym for 14 hours. Well, the truth is, losing weight is just as much as what you do in between workouts as if you work out. Now, working out is extremely important. However, it's the combination of both. Most people are doing that with personal development. Most people are waking up in the morning, they're reading the book, they're memorizing the book, they can even recite parts of the book. There was a time where I was studying this material. I studied this material for 3.5 years with no results. I was a walking, talking encyclopedia of this knowledge. However, my results did not reflect that. So what most people are doing, and I've fallen into this trap as well. So I was guilty of this before being mentored by Bob and understanding the power of implementation. But as what most people are doing is they're waking up in the morning, they're reading the book, they're memorizing the book, they can even recite parts of the book, they're putting the book down and they're thinking from their old paradigm and their old conditioning all day long. And they're saying to themselves, but I'm reading the book, but I'm doing the affirmations. However, they're not actually embodying and implementing the principles. I'm going to say it again because it's one of my favorite quotes that I coined. The ideas only work when we work the ideas. As what we have to begin to do is we have to take our goal, we have to take our self-image, we have to take our vision, and we have to begin to use those as our greatest accountability partner. See, as what a lot of people think self-image is, or what a lot of people think personal development is they'll say, well, if you want to know what it's like to be a millionaire, go and test drive a Ferrari, or go and wear fancy designer clothes. These things are all external, right? They're effects. The cause is what's going on inside of us. The true implementation is asking yourself, okay, how would I act when I'm earning, if your goal is, let's use $50,000 a week as an example. What is the self-worth, the self-esteem, the self-image of someone who is earning $50,000 a week? When I am earning $50,000 a week, how would I deal with a negative client or negative feedback or a negative situation in my personal life or my business? And when we actually start to adopt the thinking and the behaviors of the person we need to become, that's actual implementation. That is when we will consistently see the physical manifestation of the good that we desire. The easiest trap to fall into when studying personal development is reading, memorizing, and fooling ourselves that meditation or visualization or singing positive affirmations in the mirror will help us create change. Now, I want to be very clear. Just like the weight example of the person trying to lose weight, going to the gym is extremely important, right? Studying is extremely important. Affirmations are extremely important. However, what we do in between the study, what we do in between the affirmations is just as important as the study and the affirmations themselves.